We are taught a neat linear progression of history, moving from the cave to the cosmos, a comfortable narrative where we, modern humans, sit at the pinnacle of civilization. But what if the accepted timeline of human achievement is a carefully curated lie? Imagine a global, technologically advanced culture that existed thousands of years before Babylon or Egypt, that vanished without a trace, leaving behind ghosts in our geological and cartographic records. Are we truly the first sophisticated inhabitants of this planet, or merely inheritors living atop a monumental, forgotten foundation? Consider the Ottoman admiral, Piri Reis. In 1513, he compiled a map of the world, a cartographic masterpiece rediscovered in 1929. The document's precision, especially its accurate calculation of longitude, is an impossible feat for 16th century seafaring. How could a cartographer of the early Renaissance, relying on sailing ships and crude instruments, accurately chart regions only discovered and scientifically mapped centuries later, including the precise, detailed contours of South America and West Africa? But the true anomaly, the detail that shatters the established narrative and ignites the flames of forbidden archaeology, lies at the bottom edge of this ancient parchment, Antarctica. The map depicts not the frozen wasteland we know today, but a landmass clearly delineated, its topography exposed, showing mountain ranges, bays, and river systems, all beneath miles of continental ice that has been stable for at least 14,000 years. Who mapped a continent hidden under a shield of ice, and when did they possess the technical capability to do so? Mainstream science assures us that complex hydrographic surveys capable of penetrating thick continental ice sheets simply didn't exist until the mid-20th century, utilizing advanced seismic and radar technology. Yet the Piri Reis map explicitly claims to be based on source documents dating back, through successive copies, to the time of Alexander the Great. If our ancestors were primitive navigators clutching compasses and crude sextants, what powerful, forgotten technology allowed them to see through the ice, completely altering everything we thought we knew about prehistory? We must reject the explanation of coincidence. Academics like Dr. Charles Hapgood, studying the map in the 1960s, concluded that the map was not merely accurate, but projected using advanced spherical trigonometry, a technique the Turks of that era simply had not mastered. Look closely at the visual evidence. The systematic distortion around the edges of the map suggests an aerial or highly elevated perspective, perhaps even global projection technology, if we dare to whisper that forbidden word. Could this map be undeniable proof that some prior civilization possessed global positioning systems long before the invention of the microchip? The Piri Reis map, stored in the library of the Topkapi Palace, is more than just a navigational tool, it's a geological timestamp. For the coastline of Antarctica shown on Piri Reis to be visible and accurately mapped, the Earth would have needed to be warmer, specifically exiting the last major ice age, when the ice sheets retreated across the lower latitudes. This places the original survey work not in the 1500s, but somewhere between 12,000 and 15,000 years ago. Why does mainstream archaeology fight so fiercely against evidence that suggests hyper-advanced civilization existed during the Paleolithic era, potentially forcing a complete rewrite of every history book on the shelf? Think about the technological implications for navigation alone. To map thousands of miles of coastline with such staggering precision, the cartographer would need chronometers accurate enough to calculate longitude reliably, a problem not solved until the 18th century, nearly 300 years after Piri Reis compiled his work. If they did not use internal clocks, did this culture employ an external synchronized system, perhaps utilizing stationary orbital platforms or fixed high-altitude observation posts to maintain accurate tracking? This technological demand is where the fear enters the academic halls. Admitting the map's accuracy forces us to admit one of two terrifying possibilities. Either humanity has repeatedly risen to technological mastery and subsequently collapsed, erasing its own memory of global navigation and engineering, or the source materials were inherited from a non-human, or at least non-terrestrial intelligence. Which possibility is more disturbing to the established historical narrative, and which holds the key to uncovering the secrets of this lost technology? The civilization capable of creating the Piri Reis map, or providing the source data for it, demands a culture that understood complex mathematics, advanced metallurgy, and global logistics. Such a sophisticated culture would not have simply vanished without leaving major genetic traces in the surviving human population. This brings us back to the most recent and equally baffling discoveries hidden beneath the sands and permafrost of the far north. If high technology existed thousands of years ago, where did these people go? And did their unique genetic blueprint survive the Great Cataclysm? New analysis of human skeletal remains found in the remote reaches of Beringia. The ancient land bridge connecting Asia and North America is currently sending shockwaves through the anthropological community, suggesting a deep disconnection from our known history. The ancient DNA extracted from these skeletal fragments refuses to fit the expected migratory pattern. It doesn't align neatly with known Siberian or established Native American lineages. Instead, it presents unique genetic markers, true ghost lineages, that suggest an entirely separate, isolated population group existed, potentially for tens of thousands of years. Could these ghost lineages be the forgotten descendants of the surveyors who mapped the ice-free Antarctic, carrying the true genetic memory of a world the history books refuse to acknowledge? This startling DNA evidence, combined with the technological impossibility of the Piri race map, suggests that the true story of humanity is far stranger, far older, and potentially much more terrifying than any of us have dared to imagine. The Eulatian group existed, potentially for tens of thousands of years. Could these ghost lineages be the forgotten descendants of the surveyors who mapped the ice-free Antarctic, carrying the true genetic memory of a world the history books refuse to acknowledge? This startling DNA evidence, combined with the technological impossibility of the Piri race map, suggests that the true story of humanity is far stranger, far older, and potentially much more terrifying than any of us have dared to imagine. The map itself, compiled in 1513 by the Ottoman Admiral Piri Reis, is not merely an antique curiosity, it is a profound historical anomaly. Piri Reis himself stated his map was a composite of 20 source documents, some of which he claimed dated back to the period of Alexander the Great. Why would a 16th century cartographer need to rely on sources potentially thousands of years old when charting the then known coastlines of the Atlantic, unless those ancient sources held knowledge that his contemporaries simply did not possess? The initial analysis in the 1920s confirmed the map's unsettling accuracy for parts of the South American and West African coastlines, utilizing cartographic projections so mathematically complex they shouldn't have been possible until the age of modern chronometers and precise triangulation. Yet the real shock is found not in the familiar waters of the Caribbean, but at the absolute bottom of the chart, a massive landmass lying far south. How could a 1513 map accurately chart the contours of a continent, Antarctica, that wasn't officially discovered by Western explorers until 1820? This landmass, specifically the region now known as Queen Maud Land, is depicted entirely without its ice cap. For the land beneath the ice to be accurately mapped and rendered, the source cartographer must have observed the coastline during a period when Antarctica was largely temperate, a climate that last existed before the end of the last major glacial maximum, a minimum of 14,000 years ago. This detail changes everything we think we know about the timeline of global exploration, but the sheer difficulty of the task only deepens the mystery. Consider the technological leap required. Today, we map the Antarctic subglacial landscape using highly specialized radar-penetrating equipment, coupled with satellite positioning systems and deep-scan seismic profiling. This allows us to digitally reconstruct the topography hidden beneath ice that is, in some places, over 2 kilometers thick. If Piri Reis was merely copying ancient scrolls, those original surveyors, the ancestors of our forgotten Beringian ghost lineage, must have possessed a pre-Ice Age technology capable of measuring subglacial mass and utilizing an Earth-based global positioning system that rivals or even exceeds our own current capabilities. The map provides undeniable proof of a sophisticated, high-technology civilization flourishing during a period when history books claim humanity was barely scratching cave drawings. They possessed advanced trigonometry, highly accurate longitudinal measurements, and the means to create world maps based on a spherical understanding of the Earth projected onto a flat plane with near-perfect precision, a feat impossible for the navigation tools available in the 16th century. What cataclysm wiped out this ancient technological empire, erasing all memory except for a few obscure geographical charts and a haunting trace in our own DNA? The existence of a perfectly rendered ice-free Antarctica on the Piri race map is not a cartographic coincidence. It is a deliberate, precise record of a forgotten world. This means we are not just dealing with primitive tribes migrating across a land bridge, but with highly organized, technologically adept explorers moving between continents thousands of years earlier than conventional history allows. But if they had the power to map the world with such precision, what terrifying global force were they trying to protect that knowledge from? The Antarctican coastline on the Piri race map is not a cartographic coincidence. It is a deliberate, precise record of a forgotten world. This means we are not just dealing with primitive tribes migrating across a land bridge, but with highly organized, technologically adept explorers moving between continents thousands of years earlier than conventional history allows. But if they had the power to map the world with such precision, what terrifying global force were they trying to protect that knowledge from? The answer requires confronting the greatest hypocrisy in modern academia, the willful rejection of undeniable evidence. When cartographers today overlay the Piri race depiction of the Queen Maud Land coastline before it was buried under 2 kilometers of ice, the fit is staggering, suggesting a mastery of spherical trigonometry and projection far exceeding the capabilities of the 16th century Ottoman admiral, let alone any accepted ancient culture. To dismiss this map, and others like the Orontius Phineus, which similarly detail an ice-free Antarctic, scientists are forced to invoke miraculous luck or elaborate forgery, but the mathematical constants embedded in the projections contradict such naive excuses. Why is this earth-shattering proof of a global civilization with pre-glacial knowledge sitting in dusty museum archives instead of redefining every history textbook on the planet? The official story demands that human ingenuity began relatively recently, peaking with the Industrial Revolution, and any deviation from this timeline is met with institutional hostility. Yet, the physical evidence continues to mount, pushing back against the enforced historical constraints. Consider the newly analyzed DNA from the ancient remains recovered in the Beringia region, the very gateway through which humanity supposedly stumbled into the Americas. This DNA is whispering secrets of ancestry that do not neatly align with the expected single-source migration from Siberia. There are markers, highly specific haplogroups, that suggest interaction and movement far more complex than simple foot travel across a temporary land bridge. If these were not desperate nomads, but seasoned navigators operating on a planned timetable, using a precise global map, what kind of advanced exploration tools must they have possessed? We are forced to ask, how did they achieve this level of accuracy without satellite imagery, without chronometers, without industrial age precision? The key lies in what they didn't use. They did not need cumbersome steel or complex electronics. They needed a lost understanding of physics. Experts in forbidden archaeology theorize the existence of a highly specialized ancient technology, possibly harnessing geomagnetism, crystal resonance, or even atmospheric energy for global positioning and rapid transit. Methods so foreign to our current material science that we dismiss them as fantasy. If the technology was based not on mechanical output, but on resonant frequencies and energy fields, of physics we have yet to rediscover, does that explain why modern science is utterly incapable of replicating their ancient cartographic accuracy? The controversy surrounding the Piri race map and the anomalous Beringia DNA is less about historical confusion and more about the deliberate suppression of human potential. Accepting the map means accepting that a worldwide or highly technological civilization existed, charted the globe, and then vanished without a trace, long before Sumer or Egypt emerged from the mud. This terrifying realization means our current concept of linear progress is a myth. The gatekeepers of history fear that if we recognize the existence of sophisticated technology in the deep past, the foundation of modern scientific superiority crumbles, opening the door to the catastrophic knowledge of why that ancient civilization disappeared. We have the maps, we have the anomalous DNA, and we have the physical proof of technology that defies our timeline. But the most terrifying question remains. If an advanced global civilization was wiped clean from the historical record once, what are the chances that the catastrophe that ended them is already lurking just beyond our own technological horizon? The remnants of that hidden technological era, the ghost prints of a sophisticated society, are not just buried beneath the dust of time. They are hidden in plain sight, encoded in documents dismissed as historical oddities. Consider the Piri race map drafted in 1513, ostensibly by an Ottoman admiral compiling dozens of older sources. Why is this document the linchpin that forces modern historical academia to nervously look away? Because the Piri race map, which depicts the Americas with stunning accuracy long before European cartographers achieved similar feats, also shows the northern coastline of Antarctica, but critically, it shows it without its massive ice sheets. Geological evidence confirms that this area of Antarctica was last ice-free between 10,000 and 12,000 years ago, a time when our history books tell us early humans were just learning agriculture, certainly not mastering global geodesy. How could a 16th century mapmaker, or the unknown civilizations whose source material he copied, chart a continent as it existed during the last ice age melt, thousands of years before the invention of the chronometer or accurate long-distance surveying? The U.S. Air Force, specifically the highly specialized cartographic squadron, confirmed in the 1960s that the foundational geometry of the Piri race map required knowledge of spheroidal trigonometry, a technique modern science supposedly only mastered in the 18th century. Not only were the original mapmakers aware that the Earth was spherical, but they possessed the mathematical tools to accurately project huge segments of the globe onto a two-dimensional plane with near zero distortion. This level of cartographic sophistication belongs firmly to a forgotten past, a past shared by the unknown engineers who built the megalithic structures of Peru, and the enigmatic individuals whose unique DNA was found frozen in Beringia. What if the Beringia remains and the Piri race map are not separate mysteries, but fragments of the same global dataset? The map shows us what they knew, a geologically different Earth. The anomalous DNA suggests who survived the mechanism that changed the map. The science cannot reconcile this. The evidence forces us to accept that complex knowledge, Perhaps even knowledge of a technology that allowed them to navigate or measure the globe with precision was brutally interrupted. This changes everything we believe about the timeline of human development. The implication is terrifying. The people who created the original Piri Reis source material witnessed and survived the catastrophe that instantly froze Antarctica and wiped out their peers. This wasn't a slow societal decay, it was a rapid global geological event. Perhaps a crustal displacement or pole shift, instantly plunging parts of the Earth into ruinous conditions, thereby erasing the highly advanced civilization almost entirely from the record. If they possessed this high-level knowledge, why couldn't they stop their own inevitable end? The final, unsettling question remains, if a global catastrophe was powerful enough to reset advanced human civilization to zero, leaving only genetic anomalies and cartographic ghosts as proof, is it possible that the historical amnesia we suffer from is merely preparation for the next cyclical cataclysm? If ancient humanity had masters of navigation and mathematics, yet still vanished without a trace, what makes us so confident that our satellites and supercomputers provide true immunity? The maps are drawn, the anomalous DNA is sequenced, but the full story remains locked away, waiting for us to accept the uncomfortable truth. Are we alone in history? The secrets hidden in plain sight are endless, but the time to uncover them is running short. Subscribe now and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the next chapter of Hidden History. And tell us in the comments below, do you believe the Piri Reis map proves a lost civilization? Or is modern science overlooking the obvious? Let us know your theories.